had some interesting technical challenges this time. Our guest was in night vision mode on his camera in an undisclosed location. He's so productive from his remote bunker that we're going to get his productivity tips today. So we've got Joel Oleson, a
Hey,
friend of mine, a tremendous traveler, and a person that I respect his ability to travel and extensive travel for work and be productive on the road. So in addition to his travels, we're going to get some productivity tips to get us all through this, especially for people that this is the first time they may be working remotely, what to do and all that. So welcome, Joel.
hey, thanks. It's great to be here. Um, I do think about what do different travelers contribute to this to the community, and I think one of the things I definitely have in my background is I spent a lot of time in technology. We talk about all these digital nomads. I've had this digital nomad dream for a long time, but at the same time, I have a wife and three kids, and they they haven't assumed it like I have, and so I've had to kind of find a work-life balance where I end up traveling a lot, speaking at conferences, and in fact, I've had a number of employers where they're like, "We don't care where you are, just work from wherever you are." So I've had that kind of flexibility in certain jobs, um, but it's but basically since graduation from college. I've been working in technology primarily, kind of a mix of marketing, um, and a lot with the Microsoft stack, but some Java, some.
We lost him for just a moment. We'll get the connection live. Stay tuned. The entire internet is doing even more today, so we will get him back in just a moment. While we're doing that, feel free. We've got the comment section that we will take Q&A. We can always take surprise guests if people think that they're productive or hopelessly unproductive and maybe need a productivity check-in. You're absolutely welcome to dial in, hop on video for a little bit, ask a few questions. I think we've got him back. All right, we are back live. So part of being productive on the road and offline is to roll with the bumps. We've got Joel back, and go ahead, sir.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what you heard and what you didn't hear, but I was basically saying that.
Just after Microsoft Stack, I think was about where it cut out.
Yeah, yeah. Right before I started working with Microsoft, I did spend some time with Oracle, um, as well as some Java. Definitely spent a lot of time with internet technologies. So um, anyway, it's not that we have to talk about tech anyway.
Well, but I think he's a digital nomad, and it's always that dream of the laptop
Yes.
on the beach in the bright sun with the sand on the keyboard, and it seems so perfect, except I can't imagine it can really exist.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like one of the things I have worked out with a lot of jobs, even though I may not necessarily be a full-on nomad, I have worked out that once a quarter I can go speak at conferences and then essentially visit what we would call the community. So I'll go and speak with local communities in places that conferences never get to. So, as an example, if I'm speaking in Australia, I'll go visit Papua New Guinea and in fact, a great story. I met a friend of a friend on Facebook who was an exchange administrator, like Microsoft Exchange administrator in Port Moresby. I connected with him because of this common connection of a friend, just leveraging the social network,
Mhm.
and found a way to um, basically connected with him as a friend on Facebook, and then said, "Hey, I'm going to Papua New Guinea. Where should I go?" And he's like, "You should go visit my tribe." And he hooked me up with his hill tribes village in Papua New Guinea, and I stayed at the school for a couple days, and then I ended up staying in one of their huts for a while. And his this exchange administrator's boss or dad ended up being the chief of the tribe, and
Hmm.
so it was fantastic being able to spend, essentially leveraging these network and these connections to be able to connect into Papua New Guinea. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I know the social mission of is a thread throughout your life and what you do, and I'm fascinated by that. Of you have these tech skills that people around the world have an interest in. They're getting job opportunities remotely that they wouldn't have had 10, 15, 20 years ago, and so you're able to offer your skills in teaching as well as a home tour as we're walking through,
So I'm gonna
getting to
find a
tour
better connection or
your
something.
your beautiful home, and so you're giving to them as well as you're getting much more rewarding travel experiences that many of us just staying in a hotel are doing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
If,
Um, and I think that's what the difference is. I think with some people is the, I'm trying to remember whose quote it was, but it was talking about the value. The most value. It's like there's money in the bank,
mhm.
and then from a travel perspective, there's your capital from your network. Um, and it's like you're as powerful as your network. And this idea of, especially from a travel perspective, where if you've got a really strong LinkedIn connection or Facebook connections, your ability to say, hey, I'm traveling to X country, who can help me? Um, so real world story. My son Jared, he's 19 now, and a
Hmm.
few years ago he was doing his own trek across Europe, and he was 16, doing a spring break tour, and he basically came up with a number of cities he wanted to visit. He's going to Stockholm and Warsaw, and Lisbon, and it was St. Petersburg. And what was cool was leveraging my network. I was able to hook him up with one of my friends on Facebook in each of those cities, so that as he's going through, just in case, he could reach out to one of my friends. And each of them basically volunteered that they would be willing to give him a tour of the city or take him anywhere they wanted. But it is kind of the backup plan too. He kind of wanted to do it on his own, but I often find that that connection, the local connection, is one of the most powerful things you can have when you're traveling.
I wasn't even thinking about asking you for parenting tips, but I think the parents among us, I'm not one of them, but the parents that are watching must be wondering, how do you raise a son that's maybe in Europe traveling around at 16 wouldn't seem remarkable, but for an American parent, we're in the helicopter parent generations, having the confidence and almost respect for your son to be able to say, go ahead and go do that. How do you get to that point?
Um, I think, let's say the year before that, I was doing an around the world spring break tour with him,
Okay.
and we were in. I had made this promise to him. I said, hey, if you get good grades, you basically set yourself up to graduate high school, and you get honors and whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then in your junior year, you can pick anywhere in the world, and we'll go.
Hmm.
And he picked Singapore.
Okay.
And so I basically said, all right, I found a super cheap ticket to Singapore for like $380 one
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
And I figured, hey, well, Singapore is about halfway around, I could just find tickets to get the rest of the way around.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And so we went discount airlines the rest of the way around the world. Um, well, you talk about parenting techniques. While I was in India, or on my way to India on Air India, I lost my phone. I left my phone in the back seat of a plane. So now I'm traveling with my son, no computer. I was basically going to just run everything off my phone, and I lost my phone. So now all we've got is my son's phone,
Hmm.
and I kind of use this as an opportunity to say, "All right, you drive."
Oh wow,
You're
fantastic!
in control now. We've got the itinerary, and let's go. So I
You're,
think
you're you're laughing and smiling, so it sounds like it. He
it,
went up to the challenge. Yeah.
not only did it work out, but Air India, which doesn't even have a lost and found, was able to get my phone, and I had a friend in India who picked it up.
Oh
Talking about the
wow.
power of networks, it
Yeah, yeah.
was um, a friend on Facebook who lived in Kochi and waited for the 2 days it took for them to get it. I was already on to my next. I was already in Sri Lanka by the time they got the call.
Tell us quickly about Kochi. I've been there briefly on the way to Lakshadweep, but I don't know that it's quite as on the radar for foreign tourists, but it has quite distinctive sights.
Oh, I loved it. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in various places in India, but what was great about Cochin was this. It's got kind of a Christian feel to it,
Hmm.
and there's even a Jewish area in downtown.
Hmm.
So you can go to a synagogue that's over. I think they say that community's been there for 1,000+ years. There's even local traditions that it's from earlier destruction of the earlier temples that Jews had come over in boats.
Hmm.
And in the synagogue itself, it tells a local story about brass plates that the king had essentially coordinated with the Jews, where he would protect them, and they
Hmm.
had the record of that protection in these plates.
Hmm.
Um, very very unusual, very interesting story.
And as I recall, the city's famous also for the waterways nearby.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
they have these massive the fishing that they do there, where they have these massive ancient traditional fishing nets that are 30, 50 feet high, that
Hmm.
they'll dip into the water, and
Hmm.
then they pull them out, or they'll be down during the day and they'll pull them up periodically, and the fish will basically kind of tiny little minnows and things will kind of just come right out go right into their buckets without them having to get into the water.
Oh, fantastic! And uh, you mentioned flying around on budget airlines the rest way around the world. So I'm curious some of the ones that you enjoyed or said maybe I'll pass. And one of the questions from the audience, Matthew Mansfield, in that theme is saying what's going to happen to the middle seat in the future. Joel, you're not a tiny guy. You probably don't want to be in the
Right.
middle seat, but will that even exist in the future at travel?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting to imagine what travel is going to look like. Um, this was, we that trip we did end up going to Sri Lanka and Oman, and worked our way through Istanbul up to Iceland through Sweden.
Mm,
Um, Pegasus was one of the airlines.
hmm
I've flown Pegasus to Iraq as well, and I have found that some of these discount airlines are fine, like no big deal. Others, I try and avoid them like the plague. Like, I have had bad experiences on Spirit. I've had bad experiences on Ryanair, where I will purposely pay to avoid the pain. Um, you know, Real example, I'm flying between um, Northern Ireland and the UK on a Ryanair flight, and
mm,
there's a bunch of drunk guys, and they won't move. You're just trying to get into the middle seat, and it's one of those first come first serve, and there's no seats left on the plane, and they're like, no, 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 I'm saving this for some imaginary person who's going to come onto the plane later, and it's like, sorry, there's no more seats.
yeah. I
Yeah,
remember Tyler Brule of Monocle when he used to have the Financial Times column. He wrote about flying Ryanair and those that he said, what is this category of UK person that gets on a 2 to 3 hour flight, doesn't have a bit of reading material or device, sits with arms crossed the whole time, staring at the wall and probably drunk. So those are the guys I was thinking
it's
of.
true. It's true. You see the alcohol they're trying to consume. You're talking about parenting. I want to show you a couple things as I'm walking around the house.
Okay, awesome.
Um,
We love the tour. Yeah.
Here's a map of the world, drawn according to the latest discovery of 1628. This
Hmm.
is actually something my son bought. So this is
Oh,
not
wow.
even he felt like this is something he wanted decor for his room.
I see. Huh.
Um,
Wow.
something else actually that's good travel related little object here is a painting. I don't know if you guys ever been to Porto. Up in northern Haiti, they have the Emperor's Palace.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Um, and this painting here, you can see this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, there it is.
Uh-huh.
This painting comes from the up in the north. Not Port-au-Prince, but
Cap-Haitian?
Cap-Haitian.
Yeah.
Cap-Haitian. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one of the craziest family trips we ever did.
Oh, wow.
Most people wouldn't bring their family to Haiti. We went. The plan was to go spend a week in Dominican Republic,
Okay.
basically go hang out
Mm-hmm.
in one of these. What do you call them? The
An all-inclusive
all
or?
inclusives,
Yeah.
exactly. So this was
Yeah.
an all inclusive kind of trip. But I decided I wanted to go early because I wanted to spend some time in Haiti. And the intention was, oh well, I'll set up the family, in a hotel or somewhere where they can chill while I go to Haiti. They wouldn't have it. They were like, we want to go to Haiti too, and I'm like, you realize this is one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, and they're like, we want to see it.
I
So I think I've
think we
trained
need to
my
have your whole
family well.
family on this video. This is incredible. Everybody's wondering how you have this wonderful this wonderful dynamic.
Yeah, and the story doesn't end there. So after we did probably one of the craziest Haitian excursions, it ended up being. You may have heard the news where there was these parades in Haiti where they have the music and everybody's dancing on the streets,
Hmm.
and it would hit the power line.
Hmm.
Um, I was there in Haiti in one of those parades. It was in Port-au-Prince. I was in Cap-Haitian
Hmm.
during this carnival parade.
Hmm.
Um, it was one of the strangest experiences to be out there in the middle of, Haiti with one of the craziest places to go to carnival, I would say, is Haiti.
Hmm.
Um, and in fact, you talk about crazy experiences. We're in this vehicle driving across the countryside, and the locals put a chain across the road. Anywhere else in the world, that means you've got bandits or you're going to get robbed.
Hmm. Hmm.
There, it's trick or treating.
Oh. Huh.
So they put on masks and they have machetes and they ask for money, but it's part of the holiday.
Okay.
So they surround the vehicle, they ask for money or food or whatever, and the driver thinks it's funny. We're
The
yeah
cowboy.
yeah, I don't know what that was about. We negotiate with the driver, and he says to us, um, this was bad. So we negotiate with this guy, and then he opts out of the vehicle, and a driver comes in and starts driving,
Hmm.
and we're like, did he tell you everything? And this is in
Mhm.
French, right? I don't
Hmm.
speak French, and
Yeah.
I am with a friend who speaks. He had probably high school French or something,
Mhm.
maybe
Mhm.
one semester in college, and we got out of him that we had him stop the vehicle to make sure we were all on the same page, and he was disagreeing with what the deal was.
Mm.
So fast forward to us having just seen the Emperor's Palace. Now we're saying, all right, let's go to the Citadel, and he says $100,
Oh, jeez.
and we're like, what? This is
Yeah.
part of the tour. You said you'd take
Yeah.
us to the Citadel, and he says, no, that wasn't part of the deal,
Mm. Mm.
and do you need to pay me another $100? And we think he's insane. We're saying, hey, we're not going to pay the rest of the trip. And so he's stubborn. He won't. He's like, it's not possible. So
Mhm.
we walk away, start asking drivers locally, hey, how much to the Citadel? And we're looking on our maps, and it's like 2 miles. We're
Yeah.
like, how
Mhm.
could it cost $100 to go 2 miles?
Mm.
And the local drivers are all saying $100, $100, $100,
Mm.
$100. Finally, get to these motorcycle guys, and they're saying $20.
Mhm.
And we negotiate them down to $6. And we hop on the back of these motorcycles, head up the mountain, And out of nowhere, here comes this van trying to drive us off the road, screeches in front of us, almost throwing us off the motorcycles.
Oh my God.
Yeah, about killing us. And we're like, just keep, work your way around and keep going. He does that 2-3 times. Um, and finally, we get away from him and work our way
But
up.
he's with the drivers, and he's upset that you guys
Yeah, that
got to
was the
deal with
driver.
motorcycles.
Our driver was going after us.
Oh, your
It's
driver was going after you.
That was our driver. He
Oh
was
my God.
at his wit's end. I mean, it was insane. Um, and the family stayed back, but my friend and I went on the back of motorcycles up there. And it started raining,
Oh,
and the stone it's stone cobblestone road up a mountain, crazy dangerous
yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
conditions.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man, it was
Huh.
awful. And then when we get to the end of it, um, oh, by the way, you're now a mile closer. There's still another mile, and you got to take
But
horses. And
then, yeah.
I was so frustrated at that point. They're trying to charge me $40 or something for the horses. And it's like, seriously, it's a mile walking.
Yeah.
You just don't see
Yeah.
tourists or what? I'm sure that's the case, but man,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
was
that's, and I
awful.
was gonna
So
say
you're
when the day I went, the different experience you can have. All I just remember was a nice sunny day and riding that horse up. I
wow.
guess I made out very well, and but it is an incredible sight. Clearly, a lot of stress in your case. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't. What year was that when you?
it was probably it was the year of the earthquake in Haiti.
Okay. Yeah, so it
So
was about when I went around that time, and I just yeah, I don't have a memory of what the drivers were like, but
in fact, I
uh,
wonder if it was a year after it, where I wonder if I remember seeing like the mobile homes and things that were brought in. It was really strange to see all these homes that are out in the middle of nowhere and nobody living in them.
mm,
It's like you wonder where your dollars go. I think sometimes that's unfortunately the case is they think, oh, well, we can just create a city for people, but people need to work. And it being 30 minutes out of the town or an hour away from the town, there's no way for them to live in those homes that were built for them.
yeah, I remember all
So,
the damage in Port-au-Prince and but the only other foreigners I saw at the time were all the missionary groups that you could tell by their neon T-shirts, their coordinated neon
right.
T-shirts that showed where they were what they were affiliated with. Um, I think we need
I got
a
another
whole
thing I'm going to
series.
show you since we're doing the tour.
Okay, we're
Here
getting
you
the
can
full tour here, huh?
here you can see one of those scratch
They've got a
maps, right?
scratch off map. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Does that work?
Yep, I can see it. Yep. Hmm.
All right. So these are family trips, but you can see we as a family went to Australia
Hmm.
and Thailand and
Hmm.
Malaysia.
Hmm.
Um, this was our spring break trip across India.
Hmm.
Oh, actually, the Thailand and Burma, Myanmar, that was another family excursion. Back before it was okay,
Hmm.
um, we ended up taking we went our guide, our person who was our driver anyway. He told us that if you surrender your passport, they'll let you go um, in the Golden Triangle area in
Mm.
Myanmar. And this was 2008, I think, 2009. No, yeah, 2000, early 2008. So they would basically hold your passport as you went into Myanmar before it was okay.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, and
Some
we
incredible.
spent some time with some hill tribes and the long neck Karen tribe with the rings in their neck. And
Wow. So do you try with your family to have one adventurous trip, if we can call it that, a year? Or how do you keep
yeah.
it through? Yeah.
So we um, let's just say yeah, it is. I think adventurous is kind of a good way of describing it.
Mhm.
It kind of depends on finances and budgets and things like that,
Mhm.
but as well, some good stories. I remember when we were going on a family trip to Egypt,
Hmm.
and the revolution broke out, and we already had our tickets and everything,
Hmm.
and things started to calm down,
Hmm.
but it was still kind of crazy. And since our flight had been canceled, this was one of those easy jet flights from London for 200-300 bucks.
Hmm.
Um, I was like, okay, hun, do you want to go to Greece, Turkey? Where do you want to go? Middle East, whatever. And she was saying, well, I thought we were going to Egypt. And I said, yeah, but you heard about the revolution. And she's like, but you told me you have friends on the ground who said it's not that bad. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, can't you find another way to get to Egypt? So Egyptian Air was still flying. And so as a family, we still went to Egypt, and we were the only tourists in Egypt. And we, as a family, we went to Cairo. My kids had these Happy New Egypt T-shirts,
Oh wow.
and we took the train down to Luxor, and we even took a further ride down to Aswan. I had been to Egypt, but I missed Aswan when I was there. Really, really, really wanted to see Abu Simbel, and was able to take the kids. And we've got the littlest one in a stroller
Mm.
as we're cruising around Abu Simbel in the we had to take the entourage down at 4 in the morning or whatever to just
Hmm.
because of the craziness in Sudan. But it was
Hmm.
incredible family trip. I think those kinds of things bring you together as a family. And then the second revolution broke out after we got back.
Ah, jeez.
Yeah, yeah. But
You're,
amazing
you're you're one of
family
those that we
experiences.
want to find out the timing of the trips you're planning to decide if that's we're going to try to get there well before you or well after you.
Yeah, or let's just say sometimes the timing is actually impeccable. Like I was on the train between St. Petersburg and Moscow, the Nevsky
Mhm.
Express, and it was less than a couple weeks later that somebody bombed the Nevsky Express.
Oh wow. And
Yeah,
the Nevsky Express typically is it's what route and what's special about it?
St. Petersburg to Moscow,
Mhm.
and it's the fast route.
It's the fast one. Okay.
Yeah,
Have
it's
you
basically
taken?
nonstop between the two.
All right. Yeah, I have not taken those iconic Russian train journeys. I would like to at some point. I've a few journeys in the region and like overnight in Azerbaijan on a train
Mm.
that I enjoyed a lot. Those big samovars of tea I get addicted to, so I know I can fit in and quite a few train journeys in China I've taken.
Yeah, actually, my last train journey was in China. We did a family trip with our friends, and we did the um, Xi'an
Mm-hmm.
to Chengdu, and then Chengdu to Zhengzhou. How do you say that? The one with the portal to heaven, the out of the rock, and that was an overnight train. It was
Okay.
like 16 hours, and then we had a connection in the Three Sisters or something. Anyway, the where the big dam is.
Mhm. The Yangtze Dam, yeah. Mhm.
Yes, exactly. So we that after we did that train, my everybody was like they couldn't sleep, and I was thinking that we had the soft sleeper. I thought it was all right. We had our own cabin, um, but you
Yeah,
do
and
want to
that's
fill the
the soft
cabin.
sleepers are a four-person cabin typically, and on a few high-end trains they have some two-person
Yeah,
cabins as well. And then the hard sleeper, for those that aren't familiar with the distinctions, the hard sleeper are six-person and it's open a bit, so it's
yep.
the hallway is open. It's not a closed door. And in some of my trips, other than cost, I've actually preferred the hard sleepers traveling alone
Mm.
because if you're in a soft sleeper and you get a really bad snore by you, it just rattles around the whole the whole night. With a hard
Interesting.
sleeper, it's open air, and it just seems to function a little better. Although I remember traveling with a few friends years ago on a trip, and I think there were four or five of us, different classmates, and one was just she I think she was a very light sleeper, and she was across from this heavily snoring guy, and I was just laughing and laughing because she was just muttering these curses at him and that, and he's like, "I'm gonna poke you with a stick. I'm gonna do this," and all that. But I've enjoyed a lot of those train journeys in China.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah. It's a good way to get
uh,
around. I found that the trains are, a lot of them are, 50 to $100, where the flights often, until they fix them, a lot of them were $200 at the time.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And it is really so it's maybe a little less convenient now because the way they've instituted requiring IDs for tickets, it's a little bit more cumbersome for a foreigner to buy tickets. They need to be in person, and they've because some of the digital
uh,
channels don't work as well for non-Chinese IDs. There are
it's
digital channels out there,
we
but
talk about their the WeChat, and how high tech their ability to do the purchases with the phone, but like you said, for a foreigner, I even ahead of time I was trying to get all that stuff set up, and they just don't let you connect your US bank to to WeChat.
yeah, and they used to most of the stations used to have what was called a platform tickets. You'd pay 1 or 2 RMB. It would get you in the station, and then you could hop on a train and buy a ticket while you were on there. And that, like, we were traveling out of Shanghai South Railway Station a few months ago, and those are long gone. And
Hmm.
we got there just in time. They closed the window. I have Chinese bank accounts and WeChat working, but they
Oh,
closed
good.
the window to book for those. It's something around 30 minutes before departure, and I was trying to buy it last minute, and it closed it off. And even the ticket offices still, the train hadn't left, but they wouldn't sell it. It had been down under their window of like 20 minutes, and they'd eliminated the platform ticket. And even though we got a ticket for a later train, they wouldn't let us on the earlier one, even though the
Hmm.
same speed and cost. So they've some of the flexibility has been taken out. I guess some of the craziness. If you've got a ticket and you've got a seat, it's not going to be overcrowded for most of the trains. It's almost all assigned seats. Not as many of them in the past. It would be people could buy either the platform tickets or the no seat tickets and just try to fill in or upgrade. So it's plus or minus. I've in some ways, I know some of the routes I wish the trains took longer because they get there so fast. There's not as many overnight options anymore. And
Right.
flip side is places that used to be a full weekend commitment. You can go to a day trip to other provinces, and it's quite accessible. You're based in a place like Shanghai, and you can get a few provinces over by lunch and be back at night if you really want to.
Right. Right.
Let's see,
Here's
Matthew
a
Mansfield is talking about Vietnam. Have you taken trains in Vietnam? He's saying Sapa Town. I don't know that. I've not taken trains in Vietnam. But,
I've been to Ho Chi Minh, um, like Saigon area. I haven't done any trains in Vietnam though. I had a
he said
friend who was in.
the local guy smoked throughout his sleep, and nobody knows how he didn't set himself on fire. And yeah, the
Yeah,
secondhand smoke on
yeah,
the old China trains was intense, and now they've mostly eliminated it on trains. So that's that's certainly
right.
a comfort improvement.
Yeah, absolutely,
But we
absolutely.
tease people that we would talk productivity, and we've been going through so many of your crazy trips that I've gotten distracted from that mission. So I shared with the group a post that Gary Leff, A View from the Wing. I'm sure you're familiar with his blog,
Yep.
wrote, and he's an unbelievably productive blogger. For those that have travel blogs, and I'll go to like a conference, Nomadic Mats conference, Travel Con, and people are like, oh, if you can just boost your productivity to 2 posts a week, you're really cranking them out. And Gary, he is the only author on his blog. He writes 7 to 9 quality, lengthy posts a day. In addition to having a
Wow.
full-time job, he's the CFO of an academic institute in the U.S. And a few years ago, he transitioned that institute's in Washington D.C., but he moved to Austin, and so he wrote about from 2014 to now that transition, and he gave several tips, and a few I think you've probably heard from most articles, but two I wanted to get your thoughts on, and one is what I've been preaching to people is about be indispensable, and I've taken this approach that I have to work twice as hard for every client that I have right now because cuts are coming everywhere. And if you're not indispensable and you don't find a way to be indispensable, then it's easy to be forgotten and cut. So your thoughts on how to be indispensable?
So let me give you a real world example. This last trip I was on, I was in Saudi, um, Turkey, Syria, and Lebanon. And the intention was to not to take any days off. Um, and so we essentially what we tried to do was have the weekends be when we were in Syria, where we wouldn't have any connection, and and even on the Lebanese side, basically the intention was to be in the hotels when the business day opened, so
Okay.
that way, essentially, with it being so far ahead,
Hmm.
we could actually get our work, the travel part of work done during the day, and
Hmm.
then be in the hotel on decent bandwidth by the evening.
Mm.
So, and that actually worked out. It did kind I like to be able to be up by. I'm not a morning person, but when I'm
Hmm.
traveling, I do want to see these sunrises. I do want to see the difference between, morning when people are eating breakfast. I want to be out on the streets. I want to be in seeing people doing their thing.
Hmm.
And so it did mean often going hard in the morning,
Hmm.
coming back in the afternoon, taking a nap, and then going hard again in the evening because I care about food a lot, and so
Okay, sure.
I
Yeah.
want to go and experience the dinner in the evening and see that transition of what kind of music and kind of the evening entertainment happens, and
Hmm.
then get back to the hotel as, at least me being a West Coast person, I want to be, there by 9, 10 a.m. West Coast time, to where if things happen, I'm available for calls, and then I try and encourage work folks to schedule most of the calls in the morning so
Sure.
that it can be on my hours, and then basically the other time that you would think I would need to fill in those 8 hours, the being a 40-hour a week person, not a 2 hour
Hmm.
work week, but finding time to write articles when I'm flying, as an example. And I know that's difficult for a lot of people, but that's my trade-off, is like when I'm in the air, I'll try and bang out some writing that doesn't take a lot of thinking.
Hmm.
Like, I'm not doing things that need the internet. I'm just trying to pump out more of the text, for articles and things like that. And then I'll add the images back when when I have a good connection on the internet.
So tech is central to what you do. Are there what is your tech kit? It sounds like some vacations you don't even carry a laptop, but um,
I'm one of those guys who does push things. So like I try and do as much as I can on a phone.
mhm.
My phone has the full Office suite, on it,
Okay.
and I will do
What's your
most
phone
of
of
my
choice?
email. Most of my email is actually on my phone. Like most people, they use their desktop for email. I do most of it on my phone. So
Mhm.
I've gotten actually quite good at answering and responding to emails. In fact, often I'll queue up emails, even writing them on the phone. Even though I've got my laptop not far, I will do the kind of one-liner quick responses to emails on my phone.
I found that a bit that it feels, even though it's work and maybe it takes more time perhaps than using a laptop, it feels different. It feels less like work, the stuff I can do on my phone. So I like
Mm.
to
It's
switch back and
convenient
forth.
and flexible. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, so the basically my kit, I do have the Surface Book, the Microsoft Surface Book, where it's got the built-in camera. It's very lightweight,
Mhm.
so it fits well in my one bag. And as a true traveler, I feel like that's the goal, is to have one bag or no bags. And with a laptop, it is a one bag kind of solution. I do try and um, get away with one pair of pants, one pair of shorts, and like a couple of shirts that are
Mhm.
the designed to be the ones that can do the auto wicking and all that kind of stuff. The
Mm.
merino wool, that are thinner
Mhm.
and darker colors. but I'm also somebody who, when I was in Algeria, one of the first things I did when I got to Algeria was go shopping for local clothes. You know, I'm
Mm.
one who does enjoy blending, even though
Okay.
with the hair and
Mm.
and the skin, sometimes that doesn't work in certain places.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I do try and blend. Like when I was in Afghanistan, I had previously been Uzbekistan, so I had an Uzbekistan hat and
Mhm.
a Uzbeki scarf.
Mm.
So I think that was just enough to throw off the locals, thinking, "Oh, this guy is Uzbeki,"
Mm.
without me even saying where I'm from, without me even opening up my mouth. The assumption is, even though I may look odd, I was coming off as an Uzbeki in Afghanistan, so that was pretty
Yeah, I feel like
fascinating.
even if you're not fully in local costume, just trying to look normal or even look like an expat. I mean, I feel like uh,
Yeah,
in places, I mean, where places where I'm not concerned about safety or something, but I mean, you're
sure.
going to you're going to Paris to see the Louvre. You don't need to be dressed on safari with like the high wicking cargo pants and shirts and vests and
Right,
that. You know, you just dress like a normal, like you're going to a meeting, a casual gathering or something, and I'll just carry a local newspaper or something, and I feel like then, I may stick out as a foreigner if I look different, but I'll probably just seem like I belong there as an expat or something, and don't,
right.
as I said, don't look like I'm got my full safari kit to walk through a European palace.
And I'm sometimes it's helpful, you're going into a forest or it starts raining. It's like, use your resources. It's like you don't have to always bring all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
The sun hats on site in Panama or Costa Rica are going to be so much cheaper than anything you'd
Mm-hmm.
bring.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and then if you end up giving it or donating it to your driver or the
Mm-hmm.
family that you stay with, or I'm one of those ones who likes to get as local as possible as quickly as possible. I'm not going to be in a place for a few months, but in the time that I'm in that place, I want to just dive deep and I want to be able to connect with the locals. Um, it's like, let's just
Although
say,
I
as a
take issue with your one pair of pants. I always bring two, and I feel like I was just thinking of a moment on my second trip to North Korea. It was some nature park. It wasn't like some extreme outdoor activity, but it was hiking up these stones and that. And I took some really big stride on a stone, and there's this big rip, and my pants split right down, right down the seam, and actually there were extra pants back at the hotel. We were still out all day, and everybody's very calm, and typically your guides there are going to be a woman guide who's usually the one that speaks multiple languages, and then more a male guide who seems to be the enforcer type. And eventually they came through the translation, like the woman guide came over and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Stefan, we want to check if you're aware that your pants are ripped apart." And I say, "Yes, I'm doing my best, and I will change them as soon as I have the opportunity, but I am trying to keep them together." So,
That's great. That's great. I do try and wear I have these, there's traveler type pants, the ones
yeah.
that don't, they don't absorb the water, and they,
Mm,
that, even with the dirt and stuff, you can just kind of wipe it off. They're more resistant to that. And they do kind of come across as like something you'd wear in trekking in Africa or whatever. But I, I think that there's some, taking advantage of the technology in materials so that things can last longer. But my alternative is, if I were to say rip the pants that I did have, for me it's an opportunity to go look at
mm,
shopping in that location and then use that
yeah,
as part
sure.
of my pivoting and seeing it as an opportunity again. The you know the that okay, well, now what would the locals wear, and
Yeah, and
incorporating that into my outfit.
of the travel style materials, I've noticed some brands have gotten better at making them look more like normal clothes. I was just pulling up the name to make sure I had it. It's Dockers, so it's at Macy's and stores like that. They call it the
Sure,
Smart
sure.
360 Tech pants, and there's nothing really tech about them, but they're a casual cut, but they're straight legged. They don't have they're not up and down lined with pockets, and they can be dressed up to a meeting if you need to. So those I look for that don't have giant pockets or dangly bits or
Right,
zippers
right.
that are going to crunch, and I'll go with that. Um, yeah, somebody's asking what uh, if I had said I don't know that my pants are ripped apart in North Korea. But speaking of that, another of Gary's tips on productivity is you'll be more easily misunderstood, and he said it in the context of a comment in a Slack or something can much whether it's intended as sarcastic or humorous or whatever it could be taken much differently than you intend, and then working across cultures, whether it's in person or not. Whether it's incomprehensible American sports metaphors or saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Are there any rules of thumb or ways you teach yourself both online and in person to interact with your business contacts or travelers?
I know that they often have, like, let's say bigger enterprises,
Mm-hmm.
they will have write-ups on countries of cultures and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started traveling, I would do some reading about the location I'm going and from a culture perspective, so that you
Mm-hmm.
understand what's offensive. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, a good example is I'm going to Fiji. Most people would see Fiji as, oh, that's a place where I'm going to go sit on the beach. My intention of going to Fiji was I want to go visit the tribes. I want to go visit the people. And one of the things I had read ahead of time was that um, when you sit, across from somebody in the setting, there's a certain way you can put your feet. You don't want to put your feet straight out. It's offensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes understanding what's offensive
Mm-hmm.
can be helpful. And I think that, from a local customs perspective, a lot of people would say, "Oh, he's just doesn't understand our culture," and they'll just kind of dismiss it. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think that you get bonus points if you can understand cultural things that are appropriate and understanding what's offensive. Um, you, you know, Pointing is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Some cultures it's not okay to point, and others it's like you should point with your foot instead of your hand, or there's offensive ways of you know various hand gestures that are
Mm-hmm.
different in different cultures.
How about even setting aside the cultures, just interacting online, whether even if you think you're the same Americans in that, or you're doing
Yeah,
so
I
much
got a good
remote
one.
and
So
tech-wise. What have you learned to avoid or do?
well, here's a good example. You find out that Russians, and obviously this is, some people would say this is a stereotype, but I was working with the Russian dev team, and they didn't seem like they were trusting me, and it seemed like they
Mhm.
were always kind of counteracting whatever I would say, and then there was this meeting where I was really insistent and said, "No, this is actually the way.
Mhm.
This is the right way to do this thing." And I later found out that in their that I don't know if culture is the right word, or like you said, kind of the from a verbal perspective, there's something with trust where
Hmm.
they won't trust you until you've defended yourself.
Hmm.
Like they are basically going to poke you and basically question you on your opinions or your beliefs, and they
Mhm.
basically test you on purpose to try and figure out um, whether you're just making it up or whether you're just drawing a line in the sand. And especially with developers and project managers and kind of the that culture of working on a project that's international, there absolutely is a difference in that American vote versus Russian, and basically starting from the assumption that we aren't going to trust you until we are sure that what you're saying can be trusted.
Certainly, I think a lot of cultures have a perception, whether it's in business related, especially business relationships, it comes to the fore that Americans are going to be transactional and they're they're not going to stick around, or
Yep.
they'll be your friend for this deal, and then they'll forget you ever existed. So I can see why a lot of places, professionals and that would be concerned about how much do I trust this guy if tomorrow he's going to forget my name and not not.
I got another good example. When I was first early traveling, one of my first speaking gigs was in Japan,
Hmm.
and I'm meeting with the translator, and I think it was the second time I was doing my translation. I was like, basically, there's a little conversation we had about humor in Japan, and I later found out from one of the locals who was there that there's a lot of sarcasm that Americans use that in Japanese and that culture they're not going to laugh, and it's difficult sometimes when you say something that's designed to be humorous. In fact, I think in American speakers and even a lot of Europe, there's this assumption that that we need to incorporate humor into what we're saying, and sarcasm sometimes just falls on the floor in some of these cultures. So I think it's like I would say something and I would laugh, and then the translator would actually. I found out later that the translator was actually telling the locals to
Just laugh.
laugh here. Yes. And it's like, wow, you know you're not doing great when your translator has to tell them to laugh. You know.
I think any of us that have done business over there have eventually. Maybe it's part of the thing is the translator loves the part about later telling the American that's.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's the
It's
standard formula that's necessary. But yeah, I mean, there is this predilection for many Americans to it's got to be an icebreaker joke. It's got to be a joke here. It's got
yeah.
to be fun, and that's very hard. I've uh, occasionally, I mean, the only other language I speak is Mandarin, and occasionally, in some situations, a few people have said, "Wow, you've actually been funny in our language," and that's and it's that rare.
Wow.
I think I don't claim to be an expert in that. And there's plenty of times I'm sure I've fallen short, but there's times where I have gotten it right. But trying to be more of a local joke, and it is a really tough thing, and more easy I think to embarrass yourself, or do the wrong thing and just try to. Even when I moved back to the U.S. after living in China for 8 years, it was a few people commented of they noticed that I had done so much to get the colloquial references out of my English that I'd gotten used to, even if I was speaking English dealing with Chinese or other international speakers of English. I had done so much to scrub out the slang and the colloquialisms and even slow it down a bit that people are like you need to bring it back to be local again in that sense. But
Wow.
it had just gotten to be that for years I had just gotten used to. I think I heard a term that I think there was an effort to call it globalish or globish or global something. At one point, it's like the standard English that business people around the world of different cultures, the level they pick up and find as a way to clearly communicate is much different than say a native speaker would learn, and the way to interact, because it's entirely a practical thing at that point to get your message clearly and effectively across rather than trying to be entertaining or clever, or all of
Yeah.
that. And certainly my humor is dry and sarcastic, and China generally is not that way. And I felt like only with this coronavirus crisis have Chinese humor really embraced irony and sarcasm. And some of the examples I'm seeing online are
Wow.
precious. I think there's been a huge shift in the popular culture over there of kind of this in similar ways as the humor we're seeing in the U.S. about coronavirus, things like that. I've been watching for a few months in China, and have been incredibly creative and
So
and
speaking
fun.
of coronavirus and
Mm.
how it's affecting business, as a traveler, I have some very in my face examples of I was going to be doing, and in fact, I would still be come on my way back from Africa today. Um, I was supposed to do, not supposed to do, but I had already booked flights to my remaining four countries in Western Africa that would have
Mm.
happened last week.
Mm.
Um, It was basically, and I still have the visas. Not sure what I'm going to have to be able to do to get those extended. I'd be absolutely interested from the community perspective what you do when you haven't been able to, you get all these visas, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're because of this, I'm not going to be able to use it in the right time frame.
Mm.
Um, so it's like I was supposed to be in Liberia and Sierra Leone, um, Guinea, and Ivory Coast
Mm-hmm.
on this most recent trip.
Oh wow.
And I was actually planning events in Sierra Leone, in Freetown, and in Ivory Coast. Um, and we had already 100 people or so registered. And what's great is, like, this is not my day job. This is me just saying, hey, I'm gonna come to these locations. Who do I know on LinkedIn or friends of friends of friends, and finding people who have influence in those local communities
Mm-hmm.
who can find a venue
Mm-hmm.
that could then support doing an event and basically doing free events. And this was,
And what
it's
is you've said it's in tech, but what specifically is the subject you typically teach at these kind of events?
um this one was going to be about AI and Africa. Like
Hmm.
I've been trying to localize my topics even to make
Mhm.
them relevant.
Mhm.
There's a Microsoft product coming out called Project Cortex that hasn't even been released yet, but the idea is it's knowledge mining, and
Mhm.
so the intention is it's for the masses. It's really something you can turn on in your Office 365 tenant.
Mhm.
So it's something we'll see very soon, and my intention to them was to be able to help them explain how AI is going to be able to. It's kind of like, to me, when I think about Africa, and this was the analogy I was going to talk about, was they were able to kind of skip copper wires in
Mhm.
Africa and go straight to wireless.
Mhm.
And I see with AI, they'll be able to move directly from paper filing and
Mhm.
kind of that kind of world to go straight into the the AI world, where you've got your machine learning and taking advantage of these templates and auto classification, all this kind of high tech, let's say, of what it
And
can actually
probably
do
do it
with their business
efficiently in terms of
processes.
resources. I mean, I've been
Yeah,
amazed. Well, professionally, I've had some small involvement in the mobile industry, insurance,
yeah,
banking, and it's the mobile payments there are in some like M-Pesa in East Africa. I mean, so many countries in the region are pan country ones have they're so much faster and more efficient than what we've got in the US certainly, and it doesn't involve installing a 90 kilobyte megabyte app and doing all this. It's a feature phone you can bank successfully. It's incredible.
yeah. And I think that's part of my intention here, is this idea of, you can build these like lightweight mobile business automation tools, um, in a very easy way. And I do kind of see this ability for Africa to kind of skip a lot of where the rest of the world has been and jump to the high tech stuff that
Mhm.
um, will essentially building their solutions right on the cloud, skipping the whole on premise infrastructure and data centers. A lot of Africa, especially a lot of these companies, won't ever have to go through that thing of having to acquire servers and building out infrastructure and building these server farms. They'll go
Mhm.
straight to the cloud and take advantage of that, at a fraction of the cost.
No, that's fantastic, and I think a lot of people listening here are going to be interested in how to give back and connect with people in the ways that you've talked about. So thank you, Joel, for joining us today on our EPS self quarantine happy
Sure.
hour for the tour of your home that we're not allowed to visit in person, but we we
That's
had a
right.
wonderful experience in your hospitality.
Hey, thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope it was interesting. I love the stories. My blog is travelingepic.com.
Okay, and I will put that in the comments as well. Travelingepic.com. I will put it in the comments so everybody can see and enjoy. And again, thank you for joining.
Hey, thanks a
Bye,
lot,
everybody.
everybody. Let's connect. See ya.